And another edition of the Krueg Show back with you on a Saturday after Giants baseball. Giants win. Giants win. They're in D.C. What a road trip it's been. Kind of a rough stint in New York against the Mets. But then you roll into D.C. and the Nationals are not the Nationals used to be. Needless to say. And the Giants won last night and they win again today. And we bring in Ned Colletti after Giants baseball on the Krueg Show. Ned, it's funny. The Mets took 3 out of 4. Giants easily could have split that 4-game series, but they got Scherzer'd in the second game of the doubleheader. They didn't get a great call, particularly in the first game of the doubleheader. So they leave New York and they come to D.C. and Giants fans are wondering, well, how are they going to respond in D.C.? But man, the Nationals are not the national team that won the World Series just a short while ago. And Giants won last night and jumped them again today early. Last night they beat up Patrick Corbin. Today, Alex Wood did his thing, and Giants are looking for the sweep tomorrow, and they're off to a 10-5 start. If you're a Giants fan, you got to be feeling really good.
Absolutely. When you lose 3 out of 4 to New York, you're always wondering, well, is this going to lead to something else? Are we going to have a continued issue here? But that they came back the way they have so far in D.C., that's a huge thing. And this being their longest trip of the year, it's good to get it over with when it does complete, but also to finish it above 500. That's quite a chore, but that's where they're going to be.
Still a lot of dialogue about last night. And I don't know how much of last night's game you saw. Maybe you didn't see any of it, but Gabe Kapler responded to in the post game. The Nationals were upset. The Giants attempted to steal a base and score while up 6 runs in the 9th. Kapler was asked about it. He said, hey, look, we scored 7 runs in an inning this year. We know that they're capable of scoring 7 runs in an inning as well. It's definitely not about running up the score. The Giants have made it perfectly clear that the unwritten rules of baseball are, according to Austin Slater, he said those days are over. But clearly Alcides Escobar and Victor Robles were not happy. And they actually approached the Giant dugout in the 9th inning last night. There was a lot of barking going on. This is the second time in 15 games or so that we were discussing the unwritten rules of the game. Let's get your thought again on this. I mean, where do you weigh in? I believe there's some change to the tiebreaker at the end of the year, and I think it's tied to run differential. And I think that could be part of the reason that teams like the Giants want to keep pouring it on. Kapler made the point last time it happened, Ned, that he's like, hey, we're not trying to win tonight. We're trying to win this series. And that means getting deeper into the bullpen, maybe in game 1 or game 2 or game 3 of a 3 or 4 game series. It's not necessarily about running up the score as much as if we can force them to use another reliever on a Saturday, maybe that's one reliever they don't have to go to on Sunday to beat us. And that's his rationale. Give me your thought.
Cap is right on. You have to keep playing. You have to keep on trying to put runs on the board. It's a big lead, but it's not a gigantic lead. You're not talking about something that isn't insurmountable. You had a lead that disappeared in New York. You've got to put runs on the board. And as Cap says, and he's right, if you can force them, if you can prolong that inning, sure, you go in with a nice lead. If you can prolong that inning and get somebody else up, A, get somebody else not only up, but in the game, B, that's one less that they're going to have for the next day. You do have to think like that. That is a part of it. Just like the other side, when you are getting beat and your pitcher cannot get out of an inning, you're going, we're going to have to leave them out there or we're going to have to get somebody else up. It all adds up. I'm right with Cap. It all adds up.
I don't, here's the thing. Even if you weren't with Cap, where do you draw the line? I mean, I've seen a 9-run inning. I've seen a 10-run inning. I mean, at what point do you call off the dogs? I mean, it's not an easy decision for a manager to make on the fly. We've all seen huge comebacks at one point or another. So it's funny because Dave Martinez was like, he was clearly rankled about it in the post game, but he didn't want to talk about it. They asked him about it. He's like, and he's about to say something. Then he's like, you know what? Go ask Cap about that. But he felt like the Giants crossed some line of some kind. I know it doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of that, but I don't know. To me, it's like I don't know where the line is, and it would be different for different games against different teams. If you're going up against a real explosive, powerful team, I mean, the team that I can think of was the O2 Angels, who we both know way too well at this point. But you could not get back to the dugout against that team. Now, they were better offensive teams. We've both seen better offensive teams than them, but they just had a thing when they started to rally and they started to get it going. You just couldn't get back to the dugout. So I don't know. I just think that when the momentum's a tricky thing in sports, and when it flips, man, it's hard to flip it back. So when you have the momentum, I think you keep your foot on the gas, and you can debate it after the game's over, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, they also didn't hold the runner on first base. So,
Right.
if you're really trying to keep runs off the board, you expect the other team just to make outs. You can't. Come on, what are we doing here? It's a big league, so
Yeah.
you're not holding a runner on. You're going to give him a lead, a secondary lead. Ball's blooped in the left field. You're gonna try it. You're gonna do
Yeah.
what you got to do, because you're right about the momentum too. Now, how would you feel if you had yourself a 6-run lead and you started to play it easy, and next thing you know, it's a 3-run lead and a 2-run lead, and now you have lost momentum. You may end up losing the game, and now you've got to get into your bullpen yet one more guy with 150 some games left to play, 145 plus left to play. If it's a 15-run difference or something like that crazy, fine. But until then, the line will switch depending on the series and where you're at and what's going on. But this time of year, that kind of lead, you got to keep playing.
Yeah. And you see it in other sports as well. I've seen NBA players, they think the game's over. The coach sits them down. They untie their shoes a little bit. They're sitting at the end of the bench. They got a towel around their neck. They're having some water. They think the game's over. Suddenly the other team goes on a 19-2 run, and it's like, hey, wait a second, starters, get back in there. And that's when guys can get hurt. You see it in football. Guys will be sitting there in the fourth quarter of a game, and they're undoing their tape of their fingers and their hands, and then all of a sudden, you know what? You called off the dogs too soon. Now you got to get back in there for some huge, pass rush moment that you weren't anticipating because you didn't keep your foot on the gas pedal. This is momentum is tricky.
That's a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Bad feeling.
Oh, I'm sure. Because you also feel like, oh man, we misgauged this thing. Giants had a rain out on Monday. And because of it, they started this series with an opener. And Sam Long went 2 shutout. Then they brought in Jacob Junis, and he was phenomenal. I mean, the two guys didn't walk anybody combined. They worked into the 6th inning. I think worked into the 7th inning, throwing shutout ball in game 1 of this series. This is something that we saw the Giants use down the stretch, the opener. We saw LA do it a number of times. And, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my recollection, Ned, was that the Dodgers had a ton of success with it. And I know the Giants had success with it as well. They had a good record, I believe, when they went to the opener. It almost is when you think of a bullpen game, you think, oh, this is the team that's going with the bullpen game is at some form of a disadvantage. But when you have versatile, deep bullpens like the Giants and Dodgers have, it's been my experience that the bullpen game is hellish, that that's not a game advantage opposition, that there's a kind of a discomfort for the hitters on the other side of the game, or other side of the field, as far as what pitchers they're going to face in what situations. And it injects this huge unknown into baseball. I don't know. I think going with a bullpen game once a week, once every 10 days is not just maybe good for your pen and good for, the workload, but I think it may be a competitive advantage. How do you see the opener?
Well, I think it sort of depends on the makeup of your club and how much depth you have. Because, if you want to walk it back to the old days, if you had a game where your starting pitcher went an inning or 2 innings, you'd be upside down for 3 or 4 days. But if you're planning to do this, and if your pitchers are used to pitching far more than to one hitter or 2 hitters, obviously you got to pitch to 3 now. But if you're comprised like that and you're built to do it, then it can be an advantage to you. I think you have to be built to do it, and I think you kind of have to pick your spots too. If you did it 80 games in a season, I don't think there's any way you'd be able to be productive at the last month of a year. But I do think that if you do it in the right way and you plan ahead and you can think a little bit about what you're going to do and who needs some work, I think you've got an advantage. Because if you do have good relief pitchers and they're in that game, there's no doubt it is difficult for the hitters because it's changing. They see different arm angles, they see different velocities, different mix of pitches. It changes all the time. They cannot get into a rhythm because as you look back at statistics and you think back about how people say, well, when you've faced a hitter 3 times as a pitcher, you're at a disadvantage. Well, you hardly ever see that now. So teams have taken away that advantage for the offense. But you've got to be able to have a team deep enough, and you've got to have your guys set up in order to be able to do it occasionally. Once in a while, fine. But to do it occasionally, put it into your plan, map it into your rotation, so to speak. You got to have depth and you got to have a plan.
Giants beat Corbin in game 1, Ned. Where are you with the big money long-term deal for the starter? I mean, obviously it's hard to win without big-time starting pitching. You see it in October. The Nationals gave Corbin he signed a 6-year, $140 million deal in 2018. I believe that was with Arizona, right? And he got booed pretty loudly by the Nationals fans last night. He entered last night's start with a 5.59 ERA since the start of the 2020 season. So, this guy at one point was one of the nastier pitchers in the game. Where do you sit on the big money long-term deal for the starter? And is there anything that you wanted to know from either your medical people or his arsenal? Is there anything that you said, you know what, I want a guy who's a fastball curveball guy, but I don't want a guy who relies on a slider? Or was it innings, or was it scouting reports? I mean, what is the difference between making a GM like yourself or, somebody who's potentially going to invest, massive dollars in a starting pitcher? What kind of due diligence did you want to do before inking, a pitcher to that kind of a contract?
Well, there's a lot wrapped up in that discussion. There's
Sure.
all sorts of different things that I think about. I signed one of the best of our generation, Clayton Kershaw, to a long-term deal. He's been hurt a little bit lately, but he is one of the best people, preparers. Everything you want to check off, every box you want to check off, he's checking it off. Yet I cannot tell you that it was easy to do a deal in the $200 million range at 7 years. That it was difficult, even though I knew him since he was 18. I knew the record, the Cy Youngs, the whole thing. It's still precarious because you're talking about as much due diligence as you and your training staff can do. You are one pitch away from sending one of those big checks to a mailbox and having a massive gap in your rotation. So it's tough to do. I think a secondary piece to this is it shows you the benefit of your player development system and your amateur draft and your international scouting, how you have to have talent coming. So when you get to a crossroads on a pitcher, you've got to make a decision. Sometimes it's a tough decision. Look what Arizona did with Madison. You're talking about a warrior, a great pitcher, but maybe tail end of his career too that you're buying for 5 years at a time. Those are tough decisions. If you've got pitching coming, you can make a better deal, or you make no deal. But you've got to have that. It's the toughest thing to find, pitching. You got to have it to win. But at the same time, it's also the most precarious because you don't know from one game to the next really what you're going to do. What I would look for in the due diligence piece of it, you have great medical, you have all sorts of things that you can look at. You can look at arm angle, you can look at if there's fatigue, you can look at where the release point is, things like that. The easy look for me is really the delivery. If you've got somebody with a real tough delivery,
high effort,
Chris Sale, somebody like, really a difficult
Tim Lincecum.
Tim Lincecum, those players are going to have a tougher time. Is it muscle memory, and are they accustomed to it? Yes, they are. But you can't doubt that, or you can't debate really that they are walking a different line than those that are throwing like a Zach Greinke or a Greg Maddux, free and easy. No stress on the arm, no considerable stress on the arm, just kind of easy going, and clean. Even Clayton, he's got almost that dead stop in his delivery, which
Right.
he's had since he was 18 years old. And so that always kind of concerned me a little bit. And he's had some arm issue lately, and a little bit of a hip and a back and things like that. No doubt that he's got a lot of innings in him and a lot of high pressure innings in him. But you've got to think about all that, and to take a pitcher that's got a very, very violent delivery, or a delivery that has a stop and a start in it, I think you're adding to the possibility that you're going to have some regret to what you do. I go back to the scouting and player development angle of it. It's tough to continually develop pitching and continually have one follow another, have another, and every year be breaking in another starting pitcher that's capable of winning you, someplace in the teens and giving you a lot of quality work. But the teams that do that, those are the teams that are most successful for a number of reasons, including trying to figure out what they're going to do with their contract and what they're going to try to do with their long term guys. One other piece to it, I signed Greinke in LA, and I signed him to a 6-year deal, and he had as clean a delivery as anybody I've seen after Greg. But I also gave him a 3-year out, almost on purpose, taking the gauge of, if he wants to leave after 3 years, okay, let him go, because you're going to get to a point in his career, not an overpowering pitcher, somebody who knows how to pitch, but and he's still pitching, but he doesn't have the stuff that he once had, and so I gave him a 6-year deal with a 3-year out, knowing that there was a possibility he would take it, and as good as he was, I think he was 51-15 for LA, including second in the Cy Young, I think the year Arrieta won. But still, and I was not the GM at the time when he made his decision to leave, but I would have been okay with that if that's how it went, because somebody else is going to be picking up, and happen to be Arizona, is going to be picking up $200 million for a lot longer than 3 years. And you saw what it did to Arizona.
Yeah, those deals are kind of, the out. Like Bobby Evans gave Johnny Cueto a 6-year deal with an out after 2 years, and I remember the discussion in the aftermath of that signing was, he's going to be great, and then he's going to opt out after the second year, and I'm like, that's not the you ought to be worried about. You ought to be worried about an okay second year, and he opts in. And that's exactly what happened. Yes. He had an 18-win season that first year. He was awesome. If he had followed it up with another 18-win year, possibly he opts out. But how many people opt out of 4 years of guaranteed big money when you're a pitcher? That seemed unlikely. And sure enough, he opted in, and the Giants, they couldn't get to the end of that contract fast enough.
Well, you have to, in order to do something. I mean, I'm not trying to get into Bobby's thought process.
Sure.
When I come down with Zach, I have to be comfortable with the 6 years, because that's what I'm signing up for. Might he take it out? Yes, he might. But I'm signing up for the 6. And, and it's not easy. As I said, with Clayton, it was not easy, as great as he is. And, the greatest lefty I've ever been around on a consistent basis ever in 40 years. But you have to be ready to go the distance with the contract. If it's 6 years, yeah, he may leave at some point in time. But you're there. You're there for the 6. You may have a crossroad where you can adjust, but you're going to adjust only after the pitcher adjusts and tells you they're taking a hike. So you got to be set that it's not a 2-year deal and wonder if he's going to opt out, and goodness, if he's great, he's going to opt out. No, you're right. You've got to think about it. I'm signing this guy for 6 years. And if he does really, really well, there's a chance that I'll have to figure it out one more time. But you know what? I always look forward to the crossroad decisions. I wanted to be able to make decisions with as much information as I possibly could. In the Greinke case, I'm talking about, had I still been there when the 3-year out came up, I should have more information because there's going to be about 90 to 100 more starts that I'm going to have watched than I watched when I said yes to the 6. So information is king. That's why there's deadlines. That's why teams wait till the end to make moves, because every day, every hour, you got a chance to learn something that helps you with your decision making. And decision making is more than just a decision of the yes or the no, or you're going to do it, you're not going to do it. Decision making to me, that's half of it. The other half is when you're going to make a decision. I always look forward to making as many as I could, because every time I had to make a decision, I knew more than I did the time before.
It's really an interesting discussion. Would you rather? I mean, you guys signed Barry Bonds. Were you less nervous with the Barry Bonds signing because he was a position player? I mean, even though you had great confidence in the character of Clayton Kershaw, just the nature of the fact that he's a pitcher, did you feel more confident when you signed the Bonds? Because you signed Bonds to two historic deals.
Yeah, I signed him to a 2-year deal and a 5-year deal when I was there in San Fran. We signed him to a 5-year deal after he hit the 73 home runs. I mean, it's kind of a disadvantage to be trying to sign a free agent when he's just hit 73. But I was far more comfortable with that. And I think he got hurt in the 5th year and did not play the 5th year of that, if I recall right. But a hitter's a different dynamic. Plus, you're going to probably see a hitter, a guy like Barry, 145, 150 times a year. You're going to see a starting pitcher 30, 32 times a year. So different math as to not only the reliability of the injury factor to it, but also how many times are they going to have a chance to change a game for you. And so I didn't really hesitate much on the Barry from my perspective. I can't speak for Peter, Larry, or Saves, but for me, it was going to be a big number. I think it was 90. And it was going to be 5 years, and that was the going rate. We weren't talking about an old player after that season, the season when he had done what he did leading up to that negotiation.
It's interesting. The Giants have this fan fest every year, and one of the parts of the fan fest is like a CHW sponsored interview tent thing, and they trot out the Giants doctors. And you probably know all these guys. Ken Akazuki and Robert Murray, I believe is his last name. Kenneth Murray, Robert Murray. I'm not sure the first name, but Dr. Murray, Dr. Akazuki. There's 3 of them that come out that all work under the umbrella of the Giants, and they have their own private practices, but they're the Giants consulting team. And one of the questions that I asked these guys, I said, what's the most important contribution that you're making to the club? Is it overseeing, the training staff, Dave Greshner and those people, Stan Conti prior to Greshner, or is it the due diligence on potential free agents? And they quickly were like, yeah, it's that the front office will come to you and say, hey, there's a shared database of medical information from what I understand, but, having the inside word on the physicals, physical, prognosis ahead for any of these free agent acquisitions is critical, a critical part of the evaluation or the decision-making process. And I remember a couple of those doctors said, Krug, it's just pressure packed, it's like, because there's millions of dollars on the line, and these baseball people look at us and they want concrete answers. And, it's the medical profession, and we're talking about making an educated guess on somebody's body. I bring that up because I think
the practice of medicine, the practice.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think of Jason Schmidt, who you guys made one of the best trades of your era, was picking up Schmitty from the Pirates for Vogelsong and I think it was Vanderwall came to the Giants, and it was like Vogelsong and Rios and Scott Medvin or somebody like that going to the Pirates. It was a really one-sided deal, and you guys brought Schmidt to the Giants. He had some, people wondering about his durability while he came up in Atlanta's system. But obviously you guys did your due diligence on Schmidt, but then the same player becomes a free agent miles later, and he gets signed in LA, and it didn't work out. He broke down there. So it's like, the animal, so to speak, the arm, you might even know the history of the injuries because of your, the fact that you knew this player. but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have any cost assurance going forward, because the art of pitching is such an unnatural thing that there's only so many pitches in these shoulders and elbows. It's man, that part of it, Ned's got to be incredibly nerve-wracking, because you're trying to put together a team, and you're thinking of the personalities and how everybody's going to mesh, but then you also have to kind of sidestep these landmines of pitching injuries, and you never know when you're going to step on a landmine and the whole thing's going to blow up.
Well, again, a lot of different points to your discussion. I think a part of it, when you talk to medical, you've got it. Medical, to me, are almost like scouts. And if everybody could predict the future, you could fly over Vegas at midnight and see no lights.
Right.
But people cannot predict the future. Hence, you've got a city that looks like it's high noon, because people are trying to predict the future and not doing very well at it. So it's tough to predict the future. What I expected out of the medical people that I had, whether it was Stan, who came with me to LA after a year, or medical staff that was in the doctor realm, Neil Elitrash, one of the best in the business orthopedic wise, is as much definitiveness as they could give me. That I didn't want you're talking to a scout, and the scout plays both sides of the fence. I don't want that. I need something definitive, and I'll make the decision based on what you tell me. Okay. And I know that you cannot predict the future, but I also know your expertise, and I also know you've seen a lot of different things. That doesn't mean that a pitcher with a clean labrum is going to have a clean labrum 6 months down the road.
Right.
So you understand all of that going in, and you need the information. You need the information and a guided, experienced opinion. You still have to make the final decision. I go back to Hiroki Kuroda, who was a very good pitcher for us, had pitched in Japan a lot. And when he went to be examined by Neil Elitrash, Neil says, I have to tell you that the labrum is torn pretty drastically. Not completely, but pretty drastically. So I don't know if it's going to tear. I don't know if it's going to tear so much that he's going to need a repair. And then a labrum repair is not like Tommy John. It's going to be far more complicated and a much tougher road to get back to where you were. Tommy John, you can almost get back a little bit better than you were right before it.
Sure.
And so I had to take the chance and signed him, and knew it going in. And Stan Conti was our trainer at the time, and he knew it going in. And so you have to kind of work around it a little bit if you want to sign the player, and what could happen. And yes, he ended up posting for us for all the time, pretty much. I can't remember him really missing much of any time due to a labrum issue. And he pitched a long time in the big league. So, you take the science, you take the expertise, you take the history of somebody who knows what they've done, and they know they've seen different examples, different pitchers. They have to they have to learn deliveries. They have to learn really the makeup of the player. Is this player going to be coming in all the time? I mean, there's some pitchers that if they're starting, they're going to come in the training room at 1:30 every day. They're starting and go, I don't know if I can make it tonight. I'll do the best I can. You hear that 32 times a year. Other guys, you got to drag them off the mound. So the doctors also need to know the psychology of their, quote, patient to understand where they're at. But the free agency, you've got a little bit more time to sort through it. Okay. When I would look at a free agent, I knew who the possible free agents were going to be a year out. Once the season starts, hardly anybody signs. So the free agent class. So if I had some pitchers, or let's just stay with the pitching, if I had some guys that I had an interest in, Stan Conti knew by the time we got to this time of the year, keep your eye on these 7 guys here. Watch them, because sometimes they won't go on the IL, but they're going to miss a start, or they're going to push them back if they get a chance, or they're not really using their pitch repertoire as they typically would. You mentioned the slider. You got a guy with a great slider. Suddenly now he's missing a start. Suddenly now the slider is at 15, 20% of the time, not 40, 45% of the time. All those things, but yet never goes on the IL. So if you're just looking on the internet, well, how many starts the guy missed? Well, he got pushed back a little bit here and there, but he made it through. Yeah, you think, well, there's nothing wrong. No, it's you have to do due diligence completely through a season. So Stan would always know whether it was a hitter or a pitcher what I had on my mind going forward. So he and his staff will continually watch it on a day by day basis. You can do a little bit of that on the trade market. But let's face it, trade deadline time, you're going to exchange medical information. The team that the player's coming from is going to give you what they can give you. Sometimes, might be shaded a little bit where it's not quite everything. Maybe they didn't keep track of quite everything and put it in the system. So you're kind of going on reputation, you're going on trust, you're going on, do I believe this guy? All those different factors. Because a trading deadline, when you're talking about, when you hear all those deals being made at 12:30 with a 1 o'clock Pacific deadline, 12:30, here comes a deal, another one. 15 minutes after 1 o'clock, there's another 10 that are being announced because they're waiting for the paperwork or they're waiting for the phone call to be made to let the player know. All of those, there's huge risk involved in all of those. You got to be able to do your due diligence early, but you cannot get a report from the other team on a particular player until you have a deal in place. Because if there's somebody that's finicky or somebody that's got an issue, and I'm with the Giants and I say, I'm backing out of this deal. This guy's got bad, I didn't even make a deal yet. Now suddenly everybody knows, you've damaged the player, you've damaged the other club. So the trading deadline and the free agent period of time, we're talking about two distinctly different tenors to your timing, your available information, and more or less how much time you've got to make a decision with varying degrees of information.
It's really a very interesting thing. And also we've seen, things change as far as eras. GMs used to, sit around and smoke cigars, and now it's like you've got this kind of Ivy League guy who's, packed with all kinds of information. He's 10 times smarter than God. And everybody wants total assurance before they take a step forward. From your perspective as a deal maker, as a guy who's been in these trade talks, do you notice a difference between when you first got into the mix compared to recent years as far as how long it takes for a team? Like, what's the fastest you've ever made a trade? Like, have you ever made a trade like somebody said, hey, would you guys do this? And you're like, deal, done, let's do it. Or, like that conversation, you have one conversation and you made the trade. Or is it always about 5 and 6 and 7 conversations? And let me check with Stan and you check with your owner. And, or how empowered, I guess is the question, is the GM of today? Is he less empowered than he was 15, 20 years ago when there weren't this analytics arm of each organization and, information wasn't quite as prevalent, let's say? How are the deal making, has it changed as time has evolved?
It is different because, and it's not necessarily because of analytics. I think it's really different because of the amount of money that's involved now. If you're picking up a player that's making $25-30 million a year and they're banged up and you got them for the rest of that season and the next season, that's a terrible mistake you just made. Your due diligence has to be strong. I don't know any GM that just does whatever that GM wants without going to ownership. The finances are too big. You've got to always keep ownership in the loop. I never had one time, and I did it for many, many years between San Fran and LA, that Peter and Larry didn't know everything Sabes and I were thinking. That the McCourts and then Guggenheim Sports Partners, that they didn't know what I was thinking ahead of time. They were never sitting on their computer and saw that the Dodgers or the Giants made a deal, came across the internet, and they said, "Oh, I didn't even know this was being discussed." No, never. I think every team has got the same type of system in place. There's too much at stake not to do it, and the owner has the right to refuse anything. I think one of the quickest deals I ever made was the Manny Ramirez deal, and that went from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. And it was complicated. It was a 3-team deal with Pittsburgh, Red Sox, Dodgers, Pirates. 3-team deal. There were 6 players that changed hands. We needed permission from the commissioner's office to have Boston pay the $7.5 million that Manny was still owed for the rest of the '08 season. That was one of the quickest. Adrian Gonzalez I acquired. That took really from late April, planting a scene with Ben Charrington until late August. It took months to get everybody in a place where they could do it. Initial conversation with Ben. If I do that, I'm telling my fan base and my team, we're done. It's not even May 1st yet. I can't do that. So there's all different tenors to it. Sometimes it takes a year or two. Sometimes it takes a long time to get something going. At your deadline, it's a little bit quicker, but it's rare that you're going to get a call at 12:31 at 12 o'clock with a 1 o'clock deadline with a brand new deal nobody's ever thought of. Probably the quickest deal that a partial deal was my first year in LA, and I had Cesar Asturias out with Tommy John surgery, our shortstop.
Right.
I had signed Rafael Furcal in the winter. Cesar didn't come back until July-ish, okay? And he wasn't going to sit in the seat that Rafael Furcal was sitting in. So I had a little bit of a chip there to play. And I was trying to get Maddox. I got Greg, not only had him as a young player in Chicago, but also traded for him twice. I think the only Jim that's ever traded for him. So along with all the bad deals I made, there's a couple. But in that one, I knew Jim Hendry had wanted Cesar Asturias, but I had to find somebody else who could play shortstop before I could go get Maddox, just in case something happens to Rafael Furcal. There's catcher and really kind of shortstop besides your pitching. Those two positions, you can't fake it. We've talked about Joey Bart on this show. Something happens to Joey Bart, you can't fake it. You got to make him, have another guy really,
right?
Move. And so, I was able to get to make a deal with Tampa, and got a shortstop, somebody who had some versatility, Lugo, that sadly passed away this last year or so.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, and once I had that, I called Hendry about Maddox, and it was about 12:20. I had it in my mind for a long time, and we had talked about Maddox for a long time, Jimmy and I. And Jimmy's one of the great GMs of our time. I mean, straight shooter. There was no dancing around with him. And he kept saying, "Well, I need Asturias. I need Asturias." I said, "Well, I can't move him until I get another shortstop." So I got Lugo from Tampa Bay, and I called Tampa Bay and had that sitting on hold as we got to 12:30 with a 1 o'clock deadline. And I called Jimmy Hendry and I says, "You know what? I can get, I'll move you Asturias for Maddox." And he goes, "Now you tell me." I said, "Well, now's when I've got to and so we made that deal. And I got Greg, and he got he got Asturias. So, sometimes it's that quick. And the team was actually flying to Cincinnati, and Asturias, Kim Ng, I had her call me as soon as she landed with the team. And I says, as soon as you get off the plane, you're going to have to grab Asturias and get Grady Little over there and talk to Cesar and tell him he's going someplace else. And, I got Greg on a flight to Cincinnati.
I would imagine that if you're just trying, because I'm sure many times you've had to canvass the league as the summer's progressing. Have you ever made a phone call to a team that you're just canvassing the league and they're just outraged that you're calling them?
Yes, sometimes. I mean, I had it.
Do they take it personally? Like, hey,
no.
There's a lot of baseball to be played. Hot shot. We'll call you.
I mean, I had so many players, so many teams, and one in particular, and I'll tell you who it was. It was Seattle, who wanted Corey Seager. They had the brother. And no matter who I talked to, for the Mariners to come our way player-wise, the cost was always Corey Seager. I mean, it could have been a AAA pitcher, Corey Seager. It could have been the second coming of King Felix. It would have been Corey Seager, but Corey Seager would not leave, their lips. That was the guy all the time. I said, next time I call you, don't even bring up Corey Seager. I'll bring Corey Seager up to you. Why don't we do that? Because we're getting nowhere on this one. But,
right.
I mean, that was a case like that.
That it is interesting though, because I would imagine there are some teams that are like, hey, you know what? I mean, like this Nationals team, you know, Mike Rizzo. Mike Rizzo's really a solid guy, kind of an old school guy. I kind of think of Rizzo in the same vein of guys like yourself and Sabian. I mean, he's a little bit more of an old school scouting background guy. He seems like a no frills guy. They've got Josh Bell. He's a switch hitter. They're going nowhere this year. I could see Farhan calling up Rizzo later this summer and saying, hey, I'd like to have a force and a presence like Josh Bell in my lineup. Bell, by the way, got hurt in today's game and left the game. But it's like if you do it at the right time, maybe that's good. But if you do it too early, maybe you're insulting the guy, insulting the organization, and I don't know how that plays.
Well, you gotta plant the seed. Like I did with Adrian and Ben. I said, look, if you ever get around to having thoughts about moving Adrian, keep me in mind. I'm not expecting you to do it today, but I'd be remiss if I don't let you know. I do have interest down the road. How much? We'll have to see where we're at, where he's at, where everybody's at down the road. But and that's fine. I mean, you have to do that. That is part of what your due diligence is to just plant the seed. You don't call him on April 25th and say, hey, I want Adrian Gonzalez today. What do you need? That ain't happening. As far as teams that fall out of it and then have a great player to move when you get to July. And I only had to do it once in about 20 some years because the teams I was around, we were always competing, whether it was San Fran or LA. I think I did it one time in LA. I actually traded for Kyle to St. Louis. But the downside for the team with the player is injury. Other than that, there's really not much downside, especially with expanded playoffs. Because expanded playoffs not only expanded by the number of teams now that are going to qualify, but probably another 2 or 3 deep in addition that think they may have a chance. So you have got a lot of opportunity to move that player. The price is not going to go down. The price in late April is going to be X. Player stays healthy. You're still going to have a bunch of teams in the race, depending on the player and the player's performance. And if you trust in that, it's going to be X times 5 by the time you get to July. Anytime you make a deal in April, you're probably going to pay short or not get what you could get. Some teams, I could always find a team in the middle of July who would make a deal if I was willing to pick up all the salary. I got Manny Ramirez. We talked to some writers the other day. It's the 10-year anniversary of the Dodgers sale from the McCourt family to Guggenheim, coming up on May 1st. And Hanley was one of our first acquisitions. It wasn't at the deadline. It was in the middle of July. And Miami was in the kind of situation where they were trying to save every day's salary they could save. And I think it was maybe us and the A's. They were the 2 teams that were competing for a deal to get Manny Ramirez. And at the end, we just said, hey, look, we ain't worried about we had a totally different dynamic with ownership. We'll pick up all the salary. And as soon as I said that, they were ready to roll. Let's figure out who the players are. I mean, it took a couple hours after that. So, that dynamic is also a piece of it. So you can make a deal before you get to the 29th, 30th, 31st of a deadline. But to make it earlier than that, you got to really find a team that is struggling financially. And I'm not sure if there are any really struggling financially that find great value, not only in the prospect or 2 they may be getting back, but also with the daily rate. If you take 18 million contract and you divide it by 183, which is typically the length of a season, 182, 183 days, you'll see what their daily rate is. And that's that can be a pretty good rate.
One of the things that always stood out to me was that there were not a lot of rumors connected to you and Sabe's moves prior to the move coming down. Maybe in the days or day before, but not like some teams. Some teams, it's like they're constantly involved in the rumor mill. And I remember talking to Brian one time, and he's like, man, I really hate that because it ruins your chemistry. It ruins your world. And, you got wives and girlfriends and all kinds of upheaval. And what if the trade doesn't get made and you got resentment? And so he always hated that. and yet this is the trade rumor world is its own industry, and it's a booming, thriving, burgeoning industry, and you guys know that. But it seemed like your guys' deals always stayed out of the rumor mill. Was that something that Brian emphasized to other GMs or emphasized to you to emphasize to other GMs, like, do not leak this rumor or we're out? Or, I mean, how did it work that way where your guys' deals never really were in the rumor mill? Just hearing his dislike for it makes me think that he probably made some kind of, statement to his opposing GM about that exact thing. How did you feel about it, and where did you weigh in? And was Brian like that? Was he adamant about, do not spill our beans publicly, or we're out?
Well, I think everybody knew everybody, and I think everybody respected it. I think that was a factor in it. But again, when you think back to the Giants front office that I was a part of from like '95 to through '05, like 11 years, it was a small group. It was Sabes, it was myself, and the late great Dick Tidrow. That was the inner circle. The inner circle was three people, and then Bobby Evans and Jeremy Shelley, and from time to time somebody else a little bit more involved in giving us some research. Of course, your scouts, but the scouts, they don't really necessarily know exactly what you're thinking. They file reports. They may get a call about a player that you got particular interest in, but they also know, this ain't, it's unspoken. This isn't leaving. Okay, unless you got another gig you want to go to and you don't like being a Giant, you're going to keep this. It's an honor to be called and be asked your opinion. Hey, so don't ruin it. And I think that the group of GMs that were GMs at the time had a little bit more respect for the privacy of the individual, perhaps. But I know that we had a very, very small group, and our meetings were three people. It was Saves, Dick Tidrow, and myself, for the most part, 95% of the time. So that kept it small too. And Dick was the person that would go, and I mean, he sat in Chicago for a week with Ron Schuler before the big 1997 deal for Wilson Alvarez, Roberto Hernandez, and Danny Darwin. Sat there for a week. So there were two of us. There were two of us plus Dick sitting with the guy who was really our target team. So really just a small group of individuals. But we had great respect for the process, and Peter and Larry always knew everything we were thinking, and we're up to date with it. Of course, they were great with keeping the information locked up too. It doesn't necessarily do you much good to leak information. You do have some clubhouse upheaval, and if you have a team, and again, most of the teams from '97 and that I was around from 1997 all the way through the finish of my career, always competing. You don't want that team upset because somebody's going to leave that room. You don't want that. If you're not a contending team and it happens, okay, you don't want that either. But funny story.
Go ahead. Donovan says on the text line, he says, Larry, it's like Goodfellas. Never rat on your friends and always keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, he's a Donovan. You're right on. You've obviously paid attention.
We go ahead, Ned. You're about to tell us.
Yeah, I know. I mean, remember Brad Osmus, great catcher.
Yes,
he was near the end of his
really smart
career.
baseball player.
Yes, and he was our backup catcher, right? I mean, he was near the end, but I loved having him on the club, and he could help a lot of different people figure out, especially young catchers or pitching. So I'm hunting Cliff Lee at one point, right? And it's in the rumor mill. And I walk into the locker room, and he sees me, and he gives me a wink, and he stands up, and he says, "I just want everybody to know." Now, remember, this guy's hitting about 210, right? He's playing
Right.
about once every 10 days, and he sees me, he winks, and he stands up. He says, "I want everybody to know that if it's me standing in the way of Ned getting Cliff Lee, I'm going to go. I'll waive my no trade. I'll go for the good of the club, just so all you guys know that I'll give this up. No trade.
Yeah, right.
Hit a couldn't trade contract.
That's
One of my
awesome.
all-time favorite guys.
Oh man. Couple last baseball things, and we you know this kind of we were talking about the game, and all of a sudden this kind of segued into a GM stories. But that's what I love about you, Ned. You can go in any direction. Couple baseball thoughts. You kind of jogged a memory. You signed or traded for, in my mind, the greatest left-handed hitter I've ever seen in Barry Bonds, and maybe the best right-handed. You know, I didn't see Willie Mays, so I think Manny was as good a right-handed hitter as I've ever seen. Both those guys, in my opinion, should be in Cooperstown, and maybe someday will. Who's the better pure hitter between Bonds from the left side or Manny from the right side?
Well, you picked. Whenever I'm asked, you picked my top left-handed hitter I was around all the time, and my top right-handed hitter I was around all the time. Both were genius in what they did. Both saw the game, not in real. They played it in real speed, but they saw it in frame by frame by frame. I'd say Barry, the pure of the two, but that's not meant to put Manny Ramirez, in a disparaging light. Manny Ramirez, the greatest right-handed hitter I saw on a daily basis, and thought Barry and Manny both thought differently than pretty much any other hitter I've been around. And I was around Nomar for I saw Nomar, who's also a tremendously smart baseball player. And I'm sure Buster, intellect off the chart too, and guys like that. But these two guys were incredible, and both of them worked more than anybody worked at their craft. I'm not sure that they looked at a lot of video, or if this was the era that they played, it would have been studying a lot of analytics. But they worked at their craft, and they knew what they could do, and they knew how to do it, and that's what made them special.
Look who's joined the mix here, Ned.
What's up, Ned?
Look at that. It's Franny from DC. Hey, Franny, how are you, man?
Is that my caller name? Franny from DC.
Franny from DC, longtime listener, first time caller. What's up, Franny? How's things going? You and Ned know each other, and from way back. So, Franny, thanks for giving us a shout here. We were just talking about Ned and some of the deals. I just asked him how he would compare Barry and Manny as two of the great hitters, one from the left side, one from the right side. Why don't you weigh in on that? Because you're as good a baseball handicapper of this stuff as anybody. What do you think of those two guys?
I mean, it's so okay. When you make comparisons, I'm not big into huge comparisons because I feel like it takes away on the greatness scale of one another. Each has their ability to do things. Look, Barry did it in a different way. I mean, as far as he was able to spit on pitches, and not like you go back to that year where he only swung and missed 30 times, right? And so he was always hyper focused on that one area. Manny would go up with the plan of, I will look for a slider all game, and he might not get it, and he might strike out 3 times, and then you're gonna throw a slider and he'd pop you. Like the ability to be so confident in a plan was Manny Ramirez. I mean, you look at the numbers that he had with runners in scoring position too. I mean, Manny was a machine. You get a guy up there, and it wasn't all pull, right? He had the ability, especially when he had in Boston with the monster. He used it obviously, as the great ones do, but he was the user of the big part of the field in those situations. Like one thing about Manny, like, because I could talk about Barry all day long, and Ned, I'm sure you can talk about Barry, and you can talk about Manny too. But I mean, when I don't know if you remember it, it was in San Francisco. Manny had just gotten over. He was there for like in LA for maybe 2 weeks or something like that, and he had a ball just past Omar. Omar laid out for it, and it was up to his left, and he laid out for it, and it one hop. And then a short hop off the left center field wall. You ever seen that? It was the most incredible thing. His batting practices, I mean, they're just line drives everywhere. Just everyone's going to talk about the launch angle error. Launch angle and all that stuff, all it is people defining it by a number and just saying it's a high line drive. This dude hit like just scuds, like 5 feet off the ground, 10 feet off the ground. It just kept carrying. Barry, like just being so personal to it and seeing it, it's hard to describe. You saw something every day that your mouth was wide open. People can say that about Manny. Omar talked about a 3 home run game that he had in Cleveland. Not Omar, but Manny. It was like one of his 3 that he had there, that he used a different guy's bat for every single one of them because he didn't care.
I'll be right back. Guys. Keep going. Right back.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
He would just pick up the bat and be like, yeah, it feels good, and then go out and hit. And you're going, who does that? Who does that? Manny Ramirez did.
Right.
Just incredible when you think about it and what Manny, was as a hitter. Now there's other stuff that was whatever. It didn't take away from the fact that you should ask it when Ned gets back. I mean, 2 of the most studious, like guys that
smart hitters, right, Kev?
Yeah, they loved it. They loved the craft of hitting. They loved the challenge of it. They loved this guy's going to go here. The cat and mouse games. And Barry always talked about it with, it's poker. And in poker, you don't just go all in if you don't have percentages. I mean, you can if you want, but like you're always looking for percentages. And if you could get a tip, you can get something, you can eliminate something. Now the percentages are on your side. And I mean, they were there well before analytics. I think they were there, in their mind, analytics, the information. That's what analytics are, is the information. The information was already going through them like no other.
Dude, it's so good to see you, dude. I'm really happy for you doing your gig with the Nationals, and I got to ask you because you've now had a chance to watch 2 of the greatest young talents offensively in the game today. Last year, you got a chance to watch Harper every day. Now you're getting a chance to watch Soto every day. I mean, how would you compare those 2 guys? I mean, it's as far as their talent and their impact.
I wouldn't compare them because I think they're 2 separate players in the whole thing, like that whole grand scheme of things. One is so confident in his plan at all times that it like doesn't morph, right? He's able to spit on some pitches and do things that, look, I don't call him Barry Bonds. People think that I yesterday on the radio said that he's Barry Bonds. I said, no. I said he has the ability to become that because Juan Soto has the ability to spit on pitches out of the hand and that they are balls. Like he doesn't really, like I've maybe seen a handful of times in the last couple of years, coming over from the Phillies to the Nationals in those games to see him argue a pitch that's actually a strike. It's uncanny his ability at 23 years old to decipher ball strike. And I personally, this is just me speaking. I don't think we've seen the best of Juan Soto. And that's scary because every person that you see these comparisons with are Mel, Jimmy Fox, Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams. He's pretty good, and all that stuff. And you're going, that you almost like go like this on the TV going like, really? And it is up until age 23 season. That's what he's doing. Bryce does it in such a different way. They're both great. And you look at Bryce, he's won 2 MVPs. He's been touted since 15. He's been hated since he's 15 years old. And the only thing missing for Bryce to me is a world title. Juan's got that. Does that make him a better player? No, just situations. It just they go about it in 2 different ways. And man, I marvel at the fact that because look, I was a free swinger. We all know that. Not great, all that stuff. But I had the uncanny ability to put the ball in play. Like I looked at it the other day, my contact rate was like a 95. That's stupid. But at the same time, I put myself into bad situations. This kid doesn't put himself into bad situations as Juan Soto. And that to me is the part where I just I don't know how he does it because It's something you can't coach and you can't teach.
Ned, when you were away, I was asking him about Soto and Harper since last year he did the Phillies and this year he's doing the Nationals. And I was just saying those guys are so special. Ned, you've already been with us for quite a bit. If you need to jet, we can let you go. But I do want to get both your guys' thoughts on just where the Giants are in your opinion at this point. Ned, you've probably watched the Giants a few times this year because we've been doing this, but the Giants are 10-5 at this point after 15 games. Ned, give me your thoughts on what you think of the 2022 Giants, just kind of overall, and then we'll throw it to Franny. And Ned, if you got to jump at any point, just let me know.
I may have mentioned this preseason to you there, that what I was curious about with the Giants was after the type of season that they had last year was so phenomenal. Are they going to be able to recreate that and continue the fight right out of the gate? Because it's not easy to do.
Right.
It's tough to maintain that fire, that fierceness. I think I called it on your show. But you know what? I've seen them do it. It's a 15 game. It's not even 10% of a season. But I've seen it, and I think that as long as they can, the old saying, stay healthy and continue to pitch, I think the division could be decided by how the Dodgers play the Padres, how the Giants play the Padres, and how the Dodgers play the Giants. I think that'll probably end up with the division winner. Who's done best in that little round robin amongst the three?
And now let me ask you real quick. This team that you watch with the Giants, I don't want to say it where it sounds like it is a discredit to them because they are uber talented, but they're the equivalent of the guy that you go to a minor league game, a prospect, right? That they won't wow you at the beginning, but you watch them for a whole week, a whole month, and you're just like, whoa. I've watched them I've watched plenty of games just in general the last 2 weeks of the Giants. And I just sit there and I'm like, that's how they do it. They don't beat themselves. The ability, again, as a team, as a collective unit, to lay off the edges like this. They don't chase. As a collective unit, I'm already watching it in our series, just going, oof, that's a bastard to play against. If you're a pitcher, right? Like they will wait you out, they'll foul you out, and then next thing you know, they'll pop you. But I look at them like that. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but because I don't want to take credit away from them. I mean, you won 107 games and then you're out to a 10-5 start. That's how it looks with them.
Well, I don't think it discredits them at all. I think it's an accurate portrayal, and I think it's a compliment. When I watch them play, whether it was last year or through 15 games this year, they remind me a little bit of Buddy Black's Padres from 15 years ago or so, maybe 210-ish, that they don't make many mistakes. And they are finite in their approach to the game, to your point, right, of laying off pitches that are just a touch outside. They maximize every margin they can, and they know how to win. And there's a lot of teams that have a lot of talent that don't work the margins and don't know how to win, and don't. But I think that they know how to win, and they have a confidence to them, and they got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder probably because of the guys down south always getting all the praise. But they play pretty good. They don't beat themselves.
Yeah. No.
I'll tell you what jumps out. It's funny. I had the baseball writer from The Athletic, Saris, on the show last September, and I'm like, what you cover baseball and you watch all these different teams, and you're based here in the Bay Area. What is the key to Kapler and Farhan's Giants? And he said, and he didn't hesitate, didn't pause. He quickly shot back. He's like, the Giants give fewer at-bats to struggling hitters and fewer innings to struggling pitchers than any team in the big leagues. And I just thought, you know what? I was pretty impressed by the daily and constant manipulation of the 40-man and the 25-man to get advantageous roster situations and as many advantageous individual matchups as they possibly can. And that to me seemed to be a real key for the Giants. And Ned, you could probably speak to this, Franny. You probably could as well, but that's easier said than done. That's not an easy thing to do, and you have to kind of have your off-season plan, and you're going to have be disciplined in your off-season plan, how you put together your 25-man, so that you do have that back-end roster flexibility. Because if you sign major league contracts, you don't have that. So I think that a big part of Farhan's success is he signs guys at the back end of the 25-man to minor league deals, and he's got roster flexibility throughout, the 6-month season. Ned, how do you see it? Because it seems like the 40-man has become kind of what you're looking to build more than a good 25-man roster.
I think you're right on, and I think he's done a great job with it. It's not easy to do. If it was easy to do, everybody'd be doing it. But to the writer's point, when you watch, and I watch a ton of games, you can almost tell, and I'm sure Franny can, they echo it too. When you're getting into from the 5th, 6th inning on, and you're watching who comes in from the bullpen, if a guy can't throw strikes, they got no chance. And almost every team has got that guy. Okay, you can almost watch a game a night and find, depending on who you're watching, and find somebody who you would think, this guy really belong in the big leagues on the mound.
Tyler Beatty for the Giants struggles with his command. Great stuff. Struggles with the command.
But they have fewer guys like that. And they have probably, and what I've seen the Dodgers do and what I've seen the Giants do, and maybe Farhan's idea, may have been Andrew and Farhan's idea, maybe, who knows, but it works the same way with both franchises. They realize that teams that they're playing, most teams, do not have quality pitching throughout the game. So the more that they can get into that pen, going back to the first thing we talked about today, Larry, about adding an extra run when you got a big lead to maybe get into that bullpen, they exploit that. I've seen the Dodgers do it for years now. You may be up by a run in the 6th inning facing the Dodgers. If you don't have strike throwers coming in, you're going to get beat by 5 runs, but another hour from now, you'll be down by 5.
100%.
You got to make pitches. And it's two sides of that story. You got to make pitches as a staff, but as an offensive approach for your team, you got to make the other team make pitches. They've got to make pitches. Otherwise, you're just spitting on it and waiting for something else to happen. And, hey, I'll take a walk. Nothing more dangerous late in the game than a leadoff walk. Start changing the entire momentum with ball 4. But I think that's a key thing, and they've done great at it.
Yeah.
Ned, one last thing before we let you go, because I don't want to take too much of your time, because now we're already an hour in, and that was the game plan for today. But Blake Trinan on the Dodger front, setup man, I thought he was one of the keys to Robert's pen last year. They put him on the injured list yesterday. They're describing it as right shoulder discomfort. Dodgers are 9-3. They lead the majors, 750 win percentage entering yesterday, and they called up a guy named Garrett Clevenger to take his spot on the active roster. What can you tell us about Trinan? What do you think of LA's start? You're getting a pretty good look at them living down there.
Well, they continue to do what I just laid out. They will exploit. They will make you. You will pay for everything you get from them, and they wait. They wait. I watched last night's game. San Diego had a 1-0 lead, but no command. Walking guys, falling behind. They just sit and wait, and boom, next thing you know, they're up by 4 runs. That's how they play. Do they have enough starting depth? I don't know. Gonsolin has been great for them. Haney was great, but now he's on the IL. I don't know that they have enough depth. You still got the Trevor Bauer thing lingering out there one way or another. That may test them how much starting pitching depth they have. But offensively, think about it. I mean, you're an infielder, Franny, but if you were a pitcher, where are you taking a breath? There's no breath to take.
No.
There's no breath.
They continue to just step on you no matter what. It's like, oh, you want this guy? No, I got Trey Turner right behind you. You don't want him? I mean, we got Cody Bellinger finally locked in. Oh, you don't like that? We got Justin Turner. I mean, the ways they could do it. Look, I am also a believer. Ned, tell me I'm way off, but like the thing that doesn't get portrayed enough with this team, with the Dodgers, that is a hell of a base running team too. They run the bases. They are athletic. They are fast. They put pressure on you. They do so many different things that as a collective unit, when you bring up the infielder, like you're on alert already. And it doesn't matter about stolen bases. But just taking the extra base, first to third, they got two guys in the top part of their lineup that a ball in the gap doesn't have to get to the wall. They can score from first.
Yes.
That's scary.
They put huge pressure on defense, always. And another attribute that they've got, they pick the ball up.
Oh,
They've got 3 center fielders in the outfield. Chris Taylor's a really good player.
Really?
Play anywhere.
They traded Pollock. Pollock's another one. They had 4.
Yeah, they've got really, Cody plays it every day. Mookie can still play it if he had to something happen. Chris Taylor can play it every day. It's like having, forget your first baseman, having 3 shortstops in the infield. It's a difference maker. So they have a lineup that is relentless. They have defense that picks the ball up, and they run the bases, and they will put stress on your defensive thought process, your ability to protect, and your ability to execute. And not only do the infielders and outfielders and catchers know it, the opposing pitchers know it too. Totally different deal. Hey, it's been good to be with you guys.
Yeah.
Great to be with you.
Man, great to see you.
Yeah, we'll maybe do this again if Krueger wants us both on here.
Oh man, you guys are. I mean, seriously, when you can mix in a baseball player and a baseball executive and a schlub like me, man, it's fun stuff. Ned, have a great Saturday. We'll catch up with you. I'm not sure what day next week, but I'll send you a text. We'll make it happen.
Love it, boys. Be well. Good to see you, man.
Great to see you, Ned.
Good to see you, Ned. Man, Ned Colletti stopping by. One of our very, very favorites and just a great baseball guy, a guy that I love talking ball with. Franny, just a couple more minutes, and I do appreciate you stopping by. I know you've been working all day, and you're out there, and
I don't work. That's just fun.
You know what? I want to
get the easiest thing on earth.
I want to get to your broadcast last night because the Giants had this thing where upset Alcides Escobar and upset Dave Martinez, and I heard you on the broadcast. And I was like, damn, Franny sounds so big time here because you are on the Nationals broadcast. You're talking to a Nationals-centric crowd, and yet you very eloquently and kind of push back on the notion that the Giants did something wrong. I thought it was a really good, strong moment. You may have gotten all kinds of vitriol coming your way from Nats fans. I don't know what the reaction was.
No.
What was the reaction? And for people who didn't see the Nationals broadcast, but know that you're kind of a true baseball guy, give us your perspective on the Giants basically attempted to steal a base. They were up 6 runs in the 9th. Yeah. What'd you think of it when you saw it live?
Well, look, number one, so I think the bias I have is playing with Barry for a while and being a fan of Barry. His at-bats, everything could change a game no matter what. I can honestly say I hate the unwritten rules. I think they're stupid because they're not written down. Everyone has an interpretation of them. Nothing really ever aligns with anything. So my opinion doesn't mean it's right when it comes to this. Dave Martinez is like, does that make his opinion right? For him, it does. And that's right? Like that, when it comes to the unwritten rules, that's fine. But in that situation, the Giants they scored 7 runs. They had a huge outpouring in the second inning. Not once after that did they put multiple, they put one inning where they had multiple base runners after that. And then you get an 8th inning. They did in the 8th inning. You get the double off at first, and I'm like, I was fine with that then. I'm like, I just don't understand. Like, a 6-run lead is still easily doable. Now against this Giants pen, maybe not as much. But right. I look at it as it's still very doable. So if the other team is, behind you, that's there. Like, I just don't understand. When someone's behind you, why does that shut you down? Why should that stop the other team until – there's moments. Look, if it's a 10-run game, I bet you if you go back in history of the game and you look at 7th, 8th, 9th, look at like teams that are down scoring 6 runs in one of those innings, it's a lot more than a team scoring 8 or 10 or 11 runs in an inning.
Sure.
So I had no problem with it because when you have 3 guys that can go bridge on you with Soto, Nelson Cruz, and Josh Bell, one coming up, that's still a part of it. Now, maybe my thought process is different in the moment if it's 5, 6, 7, 8, coming up, where they don't have that opportunity to get to Juan or Nelson or Josh Bell. Look, I think you saw a little bit of frustration from the Nationals players just based on how things have gone so far early in the year. Doesn't make it right. Again, Alcides Escobar, he's been playing for a while, so that's his way of thinking.
Sure.
And so I'm not going to sit here and say anybody's wrong, but in my opinion, I agree with Cap in the way they played that. You could go back and say, do you think that Dubon should have, bunted the other day? Probably not, because I don't look at that as, him trying to get. It was more of it felt selfish in this situation. That's part of the feel thing. Those guys taking the extra base and if they're not going to hold you, then why don't you do that? So look, I have my baseball opinions. I also, doing Phillies games for 3+ years, learned about being honest and truthful and giving out your real opinion on it, whether it's right or wrong. That came out in me last night because to me it was right. Does that make it right? No, I don't know. But in my mind, with the unwritten rules, which are stupid, I couldn't say it. Because think about the unwritten rules, where we've gone from in the last couple of years. People gave Fernando Tatis Jr. Crap for the 3-0 swing, the grand slam that he hit last year in Texas, and I'm like, why? Juan Nicasio threw him a 2-0 slider, so he's obviously trying to get him out. Why should he take? Why should he give away a strike? If he gives away a strike right there, and it's a fastball, which it was, and he hits it out. But if he takes that, if he got a 2-0 slider, you think he's going to get 3-1 slider? Hell yeah! And if that happens, and he flails away, and next thing you know, he doesn't do that. I'm sorry, that to me was one of those things where I was like, why should he take that? Why? He's up there, he's trying to do it. My stuff, all my rules, everything gets thrown out, and it locked in when it's a position player. That's it. A position player is out there pitching, everything's off, just station to station type thing.
So what did you think of that the other day, Franny? I mean, Will Myers came in to pitch the Giants, and a couple guys took him deep, and they took some Herculean hacks against Will Myers. In that,
you can take the biggest hacks all you want. That's the part is of taking extra bases, being stopped. There's certain things like the Braves did it against us with Travis d'Arnaud. So, which was funny. D. Gordon hit him with a 52-mile-an-hour pitch, and you saw the acting on it. It was awesome. It was great theater. I think it was Adam Duvall was up a couple guys later, and it was second and third in the situation. Base hit up the middle. He gets the RBI, and you have Ron Washington waving Travis d'Arnaud home, and Travis d'Arnaud could have easily scored, and you could just see him telling him, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, and ran into an out, and basically just there you go. And I that to me was yes, there was no, there's certain things that you're asking for. He didn't want, no one wanted to see D have to throw any more pitches, and I just thought the way they handled it, guy got his hit, guy got an RBI, didn't get the second RBI. Oh well, it's not going to be the end of it. But at the end of the day, they just did it right.
Couple baseball things we got to get your thoughts on, man. It's great to see you. Me and you have battled through the years, but man, I got nothing but respect for your broadcasting ability and your
we battle our
knowledge.
Opinions.
Exactly.
Right?
That's you grind on me sometimes, man. You're all over me. Hey, but let me ask you about Philly and DC.
Think about it. That's the way I was in the clubhouse.
Let me ask you about Philly and DC. Alec Boehm the other day is like, I hate this effing place. The next day he came up, he's getting a standing ovation. You were there in Philly.
Do you know why?
Do
Do you know why?
Because he pushed
He
back
didn't
and
lie.
yeah,
He didn't lie.
he
All
didn't try
did
to
was
be like, I
say,
didn't do that. I didn't
did
say
it.
that.
I said it. And in the bad moment, I said that. And I'm like, dude, you just won. How the honesty came out. And you know what? He has absolutely freaking raked since then.
Wow. Isn't
Because
that something?
that love, because being accountable in that city, you could
Is
do
everything.
all you want. Being accountable. If you're accountable, guess what? Those people will just absolutely eat it up and be your like biggest fan. They'll boo you, but they're going to be all about you. And it just at the same time, I thought what an incredible moment for an athlete who has struggled in the last year to stand up and say, I did it. I was wrong. I'm sorry. And then move on. And that was special.
Kate Scott is our mutual friend. Obviously, I worked with her with Gary, and she's now the
Yeah.
voice of the Sixers. And I'm rooting her on. We had her on the other day, and I love her to death. And I go to Twitter the other night. Sixers are playing. She's trending on Twitter, and I'm like, oh no, what happened? What's going on? So I quickly look it up, and there's just these Sixer fans who are just outraged by some whatever. What is the key to making it in Philly as a media person in your mind? And if she were sitting right here with us and we were doing a 3-person show, she's obviously has a great career and she's doing a phenomenal job. But if you were going to give her any advice as somebody who worked in that town for 3 years and as an outsider, but you played there, so you're not a total outsider, what would you what's the key to success in Philly, or have you already told us that? Is it just being straight?
I've told her, and I honestly, she's kicking ass.
Yeah.
You get those random people on Twitter, great. She is. I told her, I was like, hey, look, there's no one more comfortable in her own skin than her.
Right.
And for Kate, all I told her was like, just be you. Like she goes, any advice? I said, just be you. That's it. Like great advice. I'm like, no, like don't fake it. You are a passionate human being, and you are as lovable, as fierce, as hardworking. Bring that out. Show it. And she has done nothing short of that. She is honestly, Larry, like it
She's
fires
awesome.
me up watching Sixers games. And all is so good with her. And he embraced from the beginning. That's such a huge moment. So yeah, I just told her, I was like, just be you. And it's not like any advice because she is herself. She's never fake. And that's the beauty of Kate. And that's going to be the beauty of Kate because she had, I don't know how to rank them, and I don't want to, but like with Harry and Merrill in Philly, Mark Zumoff was right up there, right? As far as a Philadelphia announcer and beloved and the shoes that she had to fill. And I mean, you talk about filling them. I mean, she's done a hell of a job in a city that at times has struggled with change. You have a ton of people that, for me, that know that I know her. They're like, she's great. I'm like, yes, because she's consistent. She's the same person. She doesn't change. Why? Because she's herself, and she loves it, and it's the best. It's awesome.
3 last things before we let you go, dude. And I gotta get your thoughts on Lucious Fox. The Giants signed him out of the Bahamas and gave him like $5 or $6 million, traded him to Tampa. He's now with the Nationals. He made a beautiful play today at third to rob, I think it was Wilmer Flores. He just got called up the other day. Where is his career gone? What's the prognosis? What are you hearing about him? What do you think about how he's looked so far?
Well, he's still looking for his first knock, which is it's been tough for him to get at bats in general. But defensively, he's been great. Making plays at shortstop. His first play was this diving play that, I mean, just absurd. First one up the middle, first play in his first start, fires it over to first, gets the out. Same thing goes. He made a play in the backhand going towards third base and got a force out the other day on his very first play of the game. And then the very first play he comes in today, he robs. It was rough. It was daring down the line. And I mean, to understand speed of the runner, not panic, get a good grip, fire strike. I mean, that's awesome. They like him. Obviously, you'd want to see him hit a little bit more. He's super, super fast.
Yeah.
And you talk about a guy that comes to the yard, appreciating who he is as a baseball player and where he is in there. I mean, the smile's infectious. I just can't wait to see that first hit happen, and then what happens after that. Where you just
take a breath,
that big deep breath, and get yourself to play. So, he's had a long road. That 18th birthday of his was pretty awesome. When he signed with the Giants. So I'm hoping that next couple of days he gets it done. I think it would be awesome if it happens tomorrow and he does it against the Giants to get his first knock. That would be pretty apropos for the situation, and everyone benefited. I feel like in that.
So funny that is kind of how baseball works. It's like, I bet you he does get his first hit against the Giants. It just seems like the way it should be. Two last things. Josh Bell. There was a Bleacher Report story this week that maybe the Giants might have some midseason interest in acquiring a guy like Josh Bell, who's a switch hitter and has decent stats, decent splits both ways. And they're always looking for somebody that can be a factor in their lineup. I think that's what Farhan probably will be looking for in July, maybe in pitching, but I could see Josh Bell being a guy who could be a nice player for the Giants. What do you think of Bell? What do you think of his potential? Do you look for him to maybe be a mid-season trade? Do you think how is he in their long-term plans? And kind of what do you think of him overall?
I think he's been nothing short of fabulous. To be honest with you, he's been ridiculous offensively. The power is obviously there. He hasn't had that, the ability to go, up top only a couple times this year, but, hitting at a high clip, on base at a 450 clip. Defensively, he's impressed me because he continues to work and he's getting better there. Is he the right move for the Giants? I don't know, because, they're so positional, the positional versatility that they have and need and use is such a big deal. So is he that piece that could do that for you? I don't know. All I know is that Josh Bell is a hell of a person to go along with a great baseball player. Unfortunately, he had to come out of today's game. So we'll find out if anything's up. But, yeah, I don't know. Because here's the other part. With Juan Soto there and you have a couple more years of service with him of control, you need protection. And if you start trading away Josh or Nelson, who's protecting him? And I'm afraid that if that happens, then he's going to walk 200 times. And that's not what you want to see. Juan Soto's he's so good. He is so good.
Josiah Gray tomorrow against Webb. What's Gray looking like? He was a Dodger, right? They got traded over here.
Yep.
How's
Gray? He was a Red, then a Dodger. Yeah, he's been looking really good. He had a couple good quality starts the last two times, 5 1/3 each time. A lot of swing and miss, and I think he's looking for that a little bit more than the early contact. But he's smart, athletic. It's almost like you could see the wheels turning with him, watching a guy swing and being able to know exactly where he wants to go the next pitch. He's a phenomenal interview. Love talking to him because he has a perspective as a shortstop playing it in college and then going to the mound. So you understand that he sees it in a different way, right? Like he's almost like playing the infield behind himself and thinking that route. And it's just a cool way to look at it when you're pitching. And then you throw 95, it helps. But yeah, it's going to be a great matchup tomorrow based on it's two young guys that we should see for a while.
Yeah.
And, Logan's been special. We don't need it. I mean, it's your show and you talk about it all the time, but from afar and watching Logan and knowing his story, and my first game I ever did on like a home network was him with the San Jose Giants. And then Keibert Ruiz was put for Rancho Cucamonga it was Rancho with the Dodgers. And so, them being in the same game, and seeing where they are now, I mean, that sinker changeup combo that he has, it's like, that's not fun as a hitter.
Last one, man. I think of Gabe Kapler's tenure, and I think of you. You always come to mind because you remember that disastrous, embarrassing press conference that welcomed Kapler. It was like this ridiculous attack on Kapler. And I remember talking to you at the time, and I think we had you on, and you had the absolute perspective. You're like, it didn't work in Philly. And there were reasons for that, but you were adamant at the time that it was a great hire by the Giants and that he would win over Giants fans and that he would be enormously successful. And you brought that out at a time when people were like, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
They should run him. And he was connected to this and that. And that is exactly how it's played out, Kev. As you know, 107 wins. Giants fans now love Kapler. Nobody's talking about, Bochy. I wish we had Bochy. There's a respect for Kapler. He's won over the veterans in the clubhouse. His young staff has won over the veterans in that clubhouse. He's an unmitigated success. I think there's just no doubt about that. So let's go back to that. Why did it not work? And then you had a chance to go to Philly and kind of hear about, Kapler from people that saw him there. So why, in your mind, now that you've had a couple years to digest the whole thing, why did it not work in Philly? Why was he a 500 guy there? And is he exceeding what you thought he would do here? Or is this what you expected to see from Gabe?
I didn't expect 107 wins. I don't expect 107 wins out of anybody. I expected a lot better than in Philly. It just, everything was in line as far as him and Farhan being in the same place, understanding each other, knowing what types of players that he wanted and what he liked. I think the coaching staff, which I was very against in San Francisco and I admitted that I was wrong, because they had no experience. And you were looking at a lot of guys that were a lot of newbies and a lot of stuff, but what I've learned and what I realized quickly was that in 2020, they were as aligned. They were about the product. They were about the Giants. They were about winning. It didn't matter how. It was just about to win. So, with Cap, I think a little bit of it was, the initial press conference with the Phillies and saying we're going to do things differently. And again, Philadelphia doesn't want to hear that. They just want you to do it. They don't want to hear the talk on it. My thing with Gabe is he's a ridiculous athlete, flat out. Well, what do great athletes do? They learn, they adjust, they do all that. So as a manager, why can't you do it? He did it. He did it about face, and he didn't have to do it about face, but there's certain things that he adjusted and that he was able to recognize and that he was able to see and sit back. I mean, he's very knowledgeable. We all know that. He has the ability to communicate. And I think the biggest thing more than anything is he held himself accountable and he adjusted. And when he made that adjustment, guess what? It was sky was the limit. He got the veterans in Belt and Crawford and Buster to understand that this is going to work. This, it wasn't lies. And I'm not going to say he didn't have that in Philly with the veteran guys. I just don't think there's that pushback. There's not that pushback in San Francisco right now. They understand that, you might sacrifice something here and there as an individual. And with that comes winning. And if winning is the most important thing, we're really in line.
Dude, it's so good to see you. How's the fam? How's the young growing family?
Good. Everyone's good. They just left. They were here for a week, and oh man, it's tough with the little ones.
Saying goodbye, huh?
Doing this, but but Tenley, my daughter, who's 6, she sits on my lap during a couple of games and hangs out, and she's just man, she's still a Phillies fan, which is crazy, but it's special, man. Just being able to be at the field and knowing that they would never, they don't remember. Obviously, my son would never know. My daughter doesn't remember me playing, so this is the way they know me, and that's fine.
How old are they now?
6 and 1.5.
6.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
Hey
Go
man,
ahead on
I
20.
just want to say, when we were working at KMBR together, and I told you, hey, I got a boy who's playing baseball, and you're like,
Yeah.
man, and you gave him all these batting gloves. Now he's graduated. He's going to Cal Poly. His younger brother's playing JV baseball. He's passed down some of those batting gloves, and the other day, kids putting them on. He's like, one of the kids like, oh, those are cool. He's like, yeah, Kevin Franzen gave them to my
Kids like
brother, who
who?
gave them to me. So, dude, you're a hero to the boys. Hey, man, thanks for
Always about
popping
giving,
on
man.
here. And
Well,
we're
thanks
having
for
fun
having me.
doing this YouTube thing and talking a lot of baseball and a lot of great things on the horizon. So we wish you nothing but success and have a great
I
summer in
appreciate it.
DC. And hopefully when the Nats roll into San Francisco, we can get you back on, man.
All right, we'll see you next week then.
Take care,
All right,
man.
we'll see you.
Good to see you.
All right, dude.
Kevin Franzen stopping by on the Krueg show. All right, that was a action-packed 90 minutes. Let's thank our sponsors, Telmetrics. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, or a physical therapist, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injuries, and if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist, be sure that you go to telmetrics.co, telmetrix.co. Thanks to Casey Bateman and the people at telmetrics.co for being a sponsor of the Krueg Show. And also like to thank Dan Coach Emilio. Danny is at securemoney.com. Give him a call today. He is a retirement planning specialist. His number is 925-628-9966. We got a lot of uncertainty in our world right now, and you want to make sure your money is secure. So Dan's a great guy. He's got 25 years of experience, born and raised right here in the Bay Area, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call. As I said, 925-628-9966. He will make an appointment with you. You'll sit down and talk about the options and how you can grow your portfolio. Once again, Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist at securemoney.com. And you can catch him at 925-628-9966. Big Giant Niner and Warrior fan and a terrific guy to boot, Dan Coach Amelia. And we thank Danny for being a sponsor of the Krueg Show. All right, let's finish up with the chat. A lot of interesting comments in the chat. Now, we've been talking for, well over an hour. A lot of people in the chat, get Cedric Mullins for Steven Duggar. It's funny. We've got this one from Rebel 444. He says Duggar's out on the 60-day injured list. Lefty center fielder Mullins makes sense, but it won't happen. That is going to be a very interesting thing, is how the Giants replace Steven Duggar. Today we saw a little bit of Luis Gonzalez in the outfield, and I think Gonzalez looks like a pretty good bat. So I think that's going to be an interesting one. Pop Hood Jr. says we need to see Gary Radnich on the show. All right, we'll see if we can call. And then King Tone says yes, Gary Radnich. Another vote for get Pharrell on the bench on the show. King Tone says it wasn't great. You didn't talk in the chat. Okay, I'm sorry about that. We didn't get a lot to the chat. Donovan says he wants to see Rod Brooks on the show. So we'll see who we can get. This one from King Tone said, get Willie Mays, the Godfather, with Marty, please. Man, I mean, if we can make that happen, how spectacular would it be to have the Say Hey Kid on this show? King Tone says, happy Larry has no leaf blower. Thank goodness. Yes, my neighbor is giving me a break today. No leaf blower for on a Saturday. He's more of a Monday through Friday leaf blower, to be completely honest. So, but yeah, thanks to everybody who participated today. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be alerted for all the upcoming Krueg shows. Man, I'm loving this YouTube project. I'm having fun. Thanks for supporting my channel, The Krueg Show. Thanks to Len Dempsey. Thanks to Ryan Smith. Thanks to the sponsors. Thanks to Dan Coach Emilio and Casey Bateman. If you want to help us out, like and subscribe. Simple as that. Just like and subscribe, tell a friend. If you want to support me, definitely, support our sponsors. Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist, Casey Bateman at telmetrics.co. If you're interested in sponsoring the Krueg show, just follow me on Twitter and send me a DM, and I'll get back to you, and we'll find out what your business is and if it's a fit for you and a fit for us. And if it is, we would love to have you on as a sponsor, regular sponsor on the Krueg show. Tomorrow we are going to be back. Now, tomorrow's kind of an interesting day because you got Giants baseball in the morning from DC, and then you have Warrior basketball game 4. Can the Warriors put the Nuggets away at 12:30? So the plan is to watch the Giants game tomorrow and then watch the Warriors Nuggets and talk with Cyrus Satsis in the post game. Maybe a little bit about Warriors, a little bit about the Giants, and maybe a little bit about the Warriors moving on to the next round. So thanks to everybody, though, who had a hand in today's show. We're really having a good time doing this. And we're, this week, we literally have been on the entire week because we're coming on after every Giant game and every Warrior playoff game. So literally we've been on every single day, and we will be on every single day going forward. You can catch us tomorrow, as I said, after the Giants game considerably, but after Warriors Nuggets. And then, the Giants play Monday in the 1-game series against Corbin Burns and the Brewers at Miller Park. That's going to be no picnic. And then the Giants and A's go. Maybe we can get Chris Townsend on this week and talk a little bit with Townie about how the A's are looking. And then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is the NFL draft. And we'll be doing a lot of draft stuff this week. Profiles on a lot of the players, looking at kind of doing a deep dive on YouTube as far as who the Niners may be looking at 61 in the 90s. Are they going to trade Jimmy G? Are they going to trade Deebo Samuel? If so, they could have absolutely a huge number of picks. This may wind up being the most pivotal draft in Kyle Shanahan's tenure as head coach of the 49ers. So a lot going on this week. So keep it locked on the Krueg show. Thanks to Len. Thanks to Ryan. Thanks to all of you. And let's hit the chat one last time to see who's there at the very end, if we can come up with a couple more. Donovan says, great show. Thank you. Donovan says, no leaf blowers. Let's see. Rebel 444. Would Larry read the ad backwards? I'd be very impressed. No, I cannot do any backwards reading. What else do we have here? We've got a couple votes for G-Rad, a couple votes for Rod Brooks, and let's get to the bottom of the chat. A lot of people want to see Cedric Mullins. King Tones says, peace, brother Larry, peace, King Tones. And Eric Sully said, just got off work. I'm sad I missed the show. Well, you didn't miss anything. Just go to YouTube or Twitter and check out the show in its entirety. But that's going to do it for us. Thanks to everybody who participated. Have a great rest of your Saturday.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah.